Mizuto is an edgy loser who broke up with the hot nerd of the class for being an idiot. However, when his father suddenly remarries, he finds out that his new stepsister is his ex. Now they will try to avoid each other, but they wouldn't be able to avoid falling in love once again. Mizuto and Yume were a classic middle school couple, but like most relationships at that age, it ended in a complete dumpster fire. The breakup left them both bitter, vowing to never see each other again, and completely sour on the idea of romance. However, fate, in a move straight out of a loving Alabama fanfiction, had other plans. In a shocking turn of events, their single parents get married, transforming these two ex-lovers who wanted to clap each other's dumpers into brand new step-siblings. Their new life together starts with immediate friction. The moment they arrive at their new home, they disagree on everything. When their mother walks in on them arguing, they instantly plaster on fake smiles and pretend they were just waiting for her by the door. This stupid act continues throughout their first family dinner, while their parents look on proudly, talking about how wonderful it is that their kids are getting along so well already. But underneath the facade, Yume is shooting Mizuto a death glare, silently threatening to crush his peanuts if he does anything to ruin this for their parents. Later that night, Mizuto escapes to his room to read a book, but his peace is non-existent at this point. Yume knocks and lets herself in, complaining that they can't keep calling each other by their last names now that they legally share one. Mizuto asks what she'd prefer, and Yume boldly declares that since she's technically older, he should call her Oni-chan. Mizuto immediately refutes this, pointing out that they were born on the exact same day, November 3rd, but Yume has been waiting for this moment. She smugly reveals the plain fact that she was born at 11 a.m., while he was born at 11:34 a.m., making her precisely 34 minutes older than her. Since he still refuses to be her little slave, Yume proposes a game to settle it. They will pretend to be the most innocent, loving siblings imaginable, but the moment one of them gives in to their evil desires and gets flustered by seeing the other as an object to satisfy their moist desires, that person loses. The loser will be the younger sibling, and must obey the winner. After finalizing the details, the game begins instantly. Yume goes on the offensive, snooping around his room and heading straight for a drawer where she suspects he keeps his incognito activity materials. But Mizuto is one step ahead. He counters by turning on the same swagger that made her fall for him in the first place, reminding her of their days as a couple. The move works perfectly, and Yume starts blushing and folds like an ironed shirt. This gives 1 point for Mizuto, and he immediately demands Yume call him Oni-san. When his ex-girlfriend calls him a brother, Mizuto gets slightly embarrassed, but he plays it cool, calling her a scrub who is out of his league. He then tries to pat her head like a loyal dog, but Yume, humiliated and angry, storms out of his room. The next day is their first day of high school. Before leaving, their parents force them to take a commemorative photo together. Wanting to maintain his loner persona, Mizuto tells Yume they should walk to school separately. He's content being a loser introvert, but Yumi has a secret weapon, her incredibly public persona. During the opening ceremony, she delivers an acceptance speech like a professional politician, instantly establishing herself as the smartest and most popular girl in school. Meanwhile, Mizuto can't believe the girl he once clapped every day could command a crowd like that. Soon enough, his new status as Yume's stepbrother gets him unwanted attention. When a group of guys asks him about his relationship with Yume, Mizuto tries to escape and hides in the bathroom. But even in this lonely corner, he overhears the same guys plotting to become his friend, thinking he's a total pushover they can use to get close to Yume. Back at home, Yumi worries about this exact scenario, knowing guys might try to infiltrate her life through her dumb stepbrother. The following day, the same group of simps tries to approach Mizuto, but this time, Yume steps in like a G, linking her arm with his and aggressively pushing it into her melons to establish her dominance. She then looks at the shallow-minded guys and tells them that her brother isn't available for a chat. But the second they're gone, her sweet act vanishes, and Yume goes right back to being an annoying stepsister. Later that day, they find out their parents are going out, probably to make a third baby, leaving the step-siblings alone. So Mizuto enters the kitchen and starts cooking, insulting Yume for being a trash cook, while he whips up a burnt meal. During dinner, Yume is still bothered by the arm-linking incident, but she gets even annoyed when she realizes Mizuto had completely forgotten about it, feeling that her feminine charms weren't enough to leave an impression on him. Filled with rage, she goes to take a bath, looking as pouty as her rubber duck, but just then comes up with an idea to destroy Mizuto's nonchalant persona. She walks out into the living room, where Mizuto is peacefully reading, wearing nothing but a towel. This causes the loser to choke on his drink, completely stunned by Yumi establishing dominance. Satisfied with his reaction, she sits next to him and teases him about having desires for his stepsister. But her victory is short-lived as her towel starts to come loose, almost revealing everything. At this point, Yume starts panicking, realizing she's gone too far. She thinks Mizuto will take advantage of the situation, but the loser understands her game completely. So he calmly puts his jacket over her, and scolds her for being so impulsive. Flustered by this, Yume tells him his stupid charisma won't get him anywhere, and declares that she won't let anyone destroy her family, but just when she tries. To stand up, Yume stumbles on her own feet, prompting Mizuto to catch her. This leaves both to tumble onto the sofa, landing in a position straight out of Cornhub.
Yeah, boy.
In that moment, Mizuto remembers their past, where they were a loving couple, and leans in as if to kiss her. But just then, they hear the sound of footsteps outside the door. Since their parents are already home, Mizuto acts fast and pushes Yume down, hiding her under the sofa cushions. Just then, their parents walk in, and Mizuto pretends to be reading a book, while Yume's hair sticks out of the sofa like a horror movie. At this point, they both realize that they almost made a huge mistake and get angry at themselves. The next day at school, the students are scheduled for a fitness test. While Mizuto is sitting by himself like a loser, a guy named Kawanami approaches Mizuto and asks to be his partner. Realizing that he is simply trying to get close to Yume, Mizuto tells him to forget about it. However, Kawanami assures him he has no such intentions and genuinely wants to be his friend. Just as Mizuto hesitantly agrees, he looks back and is shocked to find an embarrassed Yume listening to their conversation. Meanwhile, the girls head to the medical room for their physical examinations. A cheerful student named Minami can't stop staring at Yume's impressive milk jugs, feeling jealous that she's as flat as a board in comparison. Yume explains that she had the same problem just a year ago, which gives Minami a surge of hope. Wondering how Yume gained such a figure in just 1 year, Minami gives her a hug, hoping some of that magic will transfer. After the checkups, everyone heads to the gym, but Minami tells Yume that she never really liked the idea of physical exercise. But she demonstrates her physical abilities like a pro and moves like a drunk chimpanzee, shocking Yume to the core. On the other hand, Yume is terrified as she knows nothing about sports and worries that sucking at the fitness test will destroy her perfect student representative image. As the girls get ready for the test, Mizuto is on the other side of the gym with Kawanami, landing perfect sit-ups without even trying. Seeing his pathetic display, Yume vows not to be like him and pushes herself, reaching an impressive 32 reps. They continue through the other exercises ranging from grip tests, stretching exercises, long jump, and a 50-meter dash. After the final sprint, Yume's energy completely gives out and she starts to collapse. But just as she's about to hit the ground, Mizuto spawns to catch her like a Bollywood actor. But just as Minami approaches them, he pushes Yume over to her and walks away, leaving his ex-girlfriend slightly embarrassed. Later, in the nurse's office, Yume confesses her secret to Minami. She admits she's terrible at sports and had been secretly training in her room, afraid people would think she wasn't worthy of being the class rep. But Minami finds this incredibly admirable and feels relieved to know that the perfect Yume is just a human with insecurities. This shared secret forms a powerful bond between them, and they decide to be on a first-name basis, becoming true friends. They then start joking like a bunch of mindless vassals and start laughing for no real reason. Moments later, when the girls return to the classroom, they see Mizuto, who starts gently teasing Yume about her performance, leaving her slightly flustered. Minami notices the gentle way he talks to her and finds it sweet, but Yume just gets angry and treats his concern like a joke. The next day, Yume is absent from school, so Mizuto informs her new friend that she has a fever. Minami is clearly upset by this news, and Kawanami tries to cheer her up by teasing her, which doesn't really help her mood. She then insults Kawanami for being friends with Mizuto just to be close to Yume. As they continue talking, Minami announces that she's going to visit Yume after class, and Kawanami also offers to join. However, Minami calls him out, accusing him of just wanting to sniff Yume's armpits. Despite the accusation, Kawanami proudly declares that he doesn't like used materials, solidifying his friendship with Mizuto. Later that evening, Minami and Mizuto walk home to visit Yume, and she even brings some vegetables for her friend. Moments later, they go inside, and the two stand outside Yume's room and knock on the door. As they head inside her room, Yume is half asleep, and the two stare at her like she's an animal in a zoo. Just then, Yume groggily asks for Mizuto, which makes him slightly embarrassed. He then announces that Minami is here to see her, and finally Yume bounces off from her sleep and greets her friend. Now that Yume is awake, they all head to the kitchen to cook some porridge. While cooking, Minami, who is good at reading people, tells Mizuto that she can sense he's not just some cringe Sigma, but a guy who has probably had a girlfriend in the past. She then poses a hypothetical question. What would he do if he got another girlfriend and had to bring her home to meet the family? However, Mizuto simply tells her to control her hormones and avoids the question. Later, the annoying Minami goes to Yume's room and tries to feed her the food like a babysitter, but Mizuto simply stands behind him, wondering what bizarre reality he's forced into. Moments later, the sun begins to set and Minami heads home. But before she leaves, she asks Mizuto if they are really just step-siblings, and the loser confirms it. The moment she's gone, Mizuto goes to check up on his ex-girlfriend, but a jealous Yume starts acting up again, asking if he likes Minami. However, Mizuto tells her to get some rest and stop worrying about imaginary problems. While Yume listens to her in her battered state, Mizuto tries to leave, but the girl tells not to leave her, like he did before. Suddenly, Yume's illness seems to get worse, and she grabs Mizuto's hand and places it on her knockers to help her fall asleep. Holding her hand triggers a flashback for Mizuto. He remembers their time in junior high when he wasn't a loser, when he and Yume were a happy couple who shared book reviews. They were normal, but they broke up over a small, stupid misunderstanding after graduation. At first, they thought they'd never see each other again, but the gods of fate intervened, and their parents' remarriage doomed them to be together once more. Back in the present, the sick Yume is treating Mizuto like a personal slave, asking him to do all sorts of things for her. But after a while, Mizuto gets suspicious. He checks her temperature and realizes her fever is gone. Since Yume has been faking her illness to take advantage of him, he starts berating her. But since she's still recovering, Mizuto decides to let it slide. On the other hand, Yume, feeling bashful and a little guilty, becomes adorable again. She quietly asks him not to leave her, and Mizuto, with a sigh, reassures her that he won't go anywhere. In a flashback, it is revealed that Yume was a total simp for Mizuto back in junior high. She was so infatuated that she kept every little gift he gave her, including a stupid little eraser inside a special chest. She treated this box with the reverence of a shrine, performing a daily ritual like a devout follower praying to her god. Even in the present, her old habits still linger like a fart inside a car, because Yume picks up a pair of Mizuto's shorts and inhales its scent like an obsessed freak. She immediately blames Mizuto for her relapse, questioning why he would even wear shorts like this in the first place. Overanalyzing the situation, she starts daydreaming about getting caught, imagining the punishment she'd receive as the younger sibling for losing their game. However, Yume recollects herself and gets determined not to let that happen. So she plans to sneak the shorts back into his room. Yume waits until everyone is asleep and creeps toward Mizuto's room. But just as she's about to make her move, his door opens, and Mizuto sneaks out like a convicted felon, holding her jugs cover in his hand. This bizarre situation makes them freeze in their tracks, as they are both caught in a ridiculously compromising situation. But after a tense standoff, the former couple decides to play rock, paper, scissors to determine who has to explain themselves first. And as expected, Yume loses the game once again. Left with no other options, Yume confesses that she relapsed into her old self, the simp who used to keep all his gifts in a small box and use them to escape to her happy place. Mizuto starts to blush at the confession but tries to deny it, hoping to maintain his nonchalant persona. However, Yume sees right through him and realizes that deep down, he was happy to crack her code and see that vulnerable side of her again. So she tells him to shut his mouth and demands an explanation for why he has her Unga Bunga cover. Immediately, Mizuto launches into a stupid story about how he found the wrapper in the washing machine by accident. Yume doesn't buy the explanation but claims that just as he was about to put it back, his dad walked by, forcing him to panic and hide it in his room. On the other hand, Yume also does not have a good response, so she parrots the exact same story, but replaces his dad with her mom. They both know the other is lying, so they start questioning each other, asking if they did something naughty with the undergarments. Mizuto awkwardly denies poking or sniffing her wrapper, while Yume denies smelling or rubbing his dumper cover on herself. At this point, both the freaks realize they are equally guilty of being a creep and have lost a point in their game. Since both of them are losers, Mizuto suggests they each issue an order as a penalty, as long as it's nothing that breaks societal standards. Yume agrees to the deal, and for his command, Mizuto orders Yume not to interfere with his life outside the house. While the chick listens patiently, he claims that after all, siblings shouldn't meddle in each other's affairs. The next day after school, Yume spots Mizuto talking to a girl who looks eerily like her younger, junior high self. She realizes that this is exactly what Mizuto meant by his order. But despite the deal she made, Yume asks Minami about the girl. Minami claims she knows nothing, but adds that she's not surprised to see Mizuto with a stunning girl, claiming he's a Chad with a reputation for packing a few inches. Even though this was a neutral compliment, Yume's jealousy only gets deeper. Later, Yume gets home and spots an unfamiliar pair of women's loafers at the entrance. For a moment, she gets a little hurt, assuming that Mizuto has already moved on after their breakup. So she immediately takes a photo like a retired detective. Then she calls Mizuto with a lie, asking him to pick something up for her. In reality, she wants to get Mizuto out of the house and leave the mystery woman alone. As soon as the loser leaves his room, Yume uses this opportunity to storm into his room to confront the girl, but finds only Mizuto there. It turns out that he had come back early. Frustrated at not catching him, Yume shows him the photo as proof that a girl was there. However, Mizuto insists he was alone and, for some reason, tells Yume to check her own room. However, she soon comes back, claiming she'd didn't find anyone inside and grows even more confused. Meanwhile, Mizuto starts acting strangely, suggesting that someone must have entered their house since everything looked spotless, as if someone had cleaned it. This only agitates the already suspicious Yume, who begins to wonder if Mizuto and the mystery girl were up to something spicy. Turns out that in reality, Mizuto is playing Sherlock Holmes, trying to figure out what just happened. The truth is, the mystery girl was Minami in a wig. A few days earlier, while Mizuto was minding his own business, this disguised Minami approached him and bluntly asked him to be her baby daddy. He didn't recognize her at first, but she eventually took off her wig, revealing her real identity. A confused Mizuto asked why she wanted to marry him, and Minami explained her master plan. She wants to marry Mizuto so she can become Yume's sister-in-law. While the Chad listens to this stupid idea, Minami goes on a rant, gooning at Yume and describing the ungodly things she wants to do with her while they sleep. Mizuto does not give her a clear answer, so Minami simply follows him all the time, asking if he wants to get married. A few days later, Mizuto is stalked by Minami from the library all the way to his house, freaking him out like the ghost from Conjuring. In a moment of desperation, he calls his friend Kawanami for help. Kawanami explains that Minami is a ticking time bomb, a possessive girl who will stop at nothing to get what she wants. He even tells a story about how she had a lover in the past who supposedly died after one of her nightly sessions, all due to her obsessive love. Kawanami then reveals his master plan to get rid of Minami. He claims that Mizuto can stop her infatuation with Yume by showing her that Yume is already taken. Realizing the idea is solid, Mizuto decides to put the plan into action. He immediately goes to Yume's room and, acting completely serious, tells her he has decided on her punishment for the undergarment incident. As the winner of that round, his command is simple. Yume has to go on a date with him. This declaration leaves Yume completely shocked, as the two are technically step-siblings. The next day, Yume is eagerly waiting for Mizuto to begin their date. She tries to convince herself that it's just a normal outing between siblings and nothing more. But before she can fully rationalize this stupid situation, a strikingly handsome man approaches her. And it turns out to be the loser, Mizuto. He looks like Donald Trump's Asian clone, completely transformed from head to toe, and seeing him dress so well feels like a dream come true for Yume. She gets speechless for a moment, unable to stop admiring him and silently praising whoever was responsible for styling his hair. A few moments later, they head to a massive aquarium, a classic date spot for couples, which only serves to make Yume overanalyze their situation even more. While they stand in the long queue for tickets, the more she gazes at Mizuto, the more she can't stop thinking about just how attractive her stepbrother is. When they finally get their tickets, Mizuto takes her hand to lead her inside, but this makes Yume release thick biological gravy between her legs. Unbeknownst to her, two people are secretly following them, Minami and Kawanami, who are on their own date, specifically to spy on their friends. It turns out that Mizuto is fully aware of their surveillance, as this is all part of Kawanami's grand master plan to make everyone engage in a sausage fest. Before the date, Mizuto had met with Kawanami for a full prep session. His friend gave him advice, helped him pick out his clothes, tucked his flagpole under his legs, and even styled his hair. As Kawanami explained it, the goal was to break two hearts with one stone. The plan is to create a scenario so convincing that Minami will see that Yume is deeply in love with Mizuto, a full-on Alabama romance, and will finally back off from her obsessive pursuit of marrying Mizuto. As part of this, Kawanami gave Mizuto a specific instruction. Compliment Yume's dress in a nonchalant but confident manner. Even though Mizuto finds it incredibly challenging, he deploys his most awkward riz and manages to get the words out. However, he realizes that the riz bombed harder than Logan Paul when Yume just glares at him in response. But from the spy's perspective, it looks like they're a real couple getting along perfectly. Inside the aquarium, the atmosphere between them remains tense and awkward. As the place gets more crowded, Mizuto pulls Yume closer to him to navigate through the crowd of people. At this point, his cologne clouds her thoughts, but Yume quickly composes herself and shoots him another glare. Seeing her reaction, Mizuto feels a pang of guilt, but even he can't deny that he wants to grab her milk containers. To any outsider, they look far more like a couple than siblings. Afterward, they take a break and head to their respective bathrooms. Mizuto immediately calls Kawanami to discuss the battle plan, but his friend can't stop giggling on the other end of the line, thrilled that the plan is working so perfectly. Frustrated by this reaction, Mizuto decides he can't let the awkwardness linger and starts coming up with his own plan. On the other hand, Yume, with a brain smaller than her jugs, gets completely lost on her way back. But before she can get upset, Mizuto calls her and, in a surprisingly gentle tone, tells her to stay put and not to move. This small act of kindness reminds Yume of their very first date at a festival back in junior high, where she also got lost. She remembers how she kept apologizing, terrified of being a burden, but Mizuto was incredibly sweet and reassured her that he would never leave her. Now, in the present, his gentle tone, instead of his usual teasing, makes her think that maybe they really are meant to be together. A few minutes later, Mizuto arrives with a drink for her, but the sweetness ends there, as he immediately starts roasting Yume for her terrible sense of direction and for being a blind idiot. The lighthearted teasing is exactly what they needed, breaking the tension and making them both feel comfortable again. The rest of the day continues with them arguing and debating every topic imaginable, from the literary merits of books to the anatomy of sharks. For Mizuto, this is infinitely better than their old relationship. He then reflects on how, after their breakup, he began to hate everything about her, even the things he used to love the most, like her massive dumpers, which was the most painful part of it all. Now that the toxic bond of being a couple is broken, they have nothing to lose as step-siblings. It becomes clear that Mizuto prefers this raw, honest animosity over their suffocating previous relationship. As the day ends, they go home separately. Yume leaves first, and just as Mizuto is feeling a bit nostalgic, Minami casually bumps into him, acting as if she wasn't following him the entire day. She apologizes for sneaking into his house the other day, shamelessly justifying it by saying it was his fault for leaving the door unlocked. Minami then begs him not to tell Yume about her obsessive behavior, and after considering it for a while, Mizuto agrees not to. He knows Minami is an important friend to Yume, but tells her to respect the boundaries of other people. As they continue talking, Mizuto brings up the mysterious extra fifth chair he saw at her dining table. Minami explains that she likes to pretend play, and that the chair is part of her delusion, a place for her future self in their family. She apologizes like a creepy convict, but claims that she won't stop pressuring him to marry her so she can become Yume's sister-in-law. The day isn't over yet because back at home, Yume is still troubled by thoughts of the mystery girl who was at their house. When Mizuto arrives, she decides to claim her prize for the underwear incident. As part of his punishment, she demands that Mizuto let her take pictures of him. The simp obliges and goes into full modeling mode, while an excited Yume takes millions of photos. Her old obsession with nasty finger movements in bed while looking at his pictures gets more and more evident. As they continue, Mizuto offers to grant her one more wish. So Yume shyly asks him to hug her from behind and whisper in her ear to fulfill her evil fantasy. He happily obliges, and they embrace closely for a while. When Monday arrives, Yume and Minami's friendship is still going strong, as the plan seems to be working flawlessly. Meanwhile, Kawanami pulls Mizuto aside and advises him to come to him if he ever has trouble with Minami again. This makes Mizuto suspect that his new best friend might just be Minami's obsessive ex-boyfriend. In a flashback, a core memory from Junior, Hai reveals that Mizuto and a nerdy Yume were still strangers. But during an overnight school camp, Mizuto steps outside to gaze at the moon and finds Yume in another room, doing the exact same thing. It turns out that this was the first time they truly crossed paths. The two idiots make small talk while Mizuto helps her with curry ingredients, and then they sit together watching the moon. Mizuto still remembers that moment clearly. He recalls the moment Yume used a cheesy line to tell him she liked him, and he admitted he already had feelings in his flagpole for her. Back in the present, Yume asks Mizuto about their plans for Mother's Day. But being a lazy idiot, Mizuto claims he's not interested, as he's not used to celebrating such things. But Yume insists they pick out a gift together, arguing that it would please her mom to see them acting like proper siblings. However, Mizuto stands by his word and refuses, preferring to spend his weekend reading. A few moments later, Yume reappears looking incredibly cute, fully dressed to go out. The sight completely stuns Mizuto, and his jaw practically miscarriages as he drops his book in shock. Seeing this, Yume smirks, pleased with his reaction, and points out that by looking at his stepsister that way, he just lost a point in their little game. So, as his punishment, Mizuto has to join her to buy a gift. Later, the two take a crowded train to the mall, and during the ride, a small jolt makes Mizuto lose his balance, and he gets pushed right up against Yume's knocker boots. As he awkwardly tries to move away, she tells him to just stay put so he can enjoy it more. At the mall, they browse for gifts, considering everything from a frying pan to cutlery with their faces on it, but ultimately settle on a beautiful bouquet of flowers. Back home, they present the flowers to their new mom, expressing their gratitude. She's so moved that she starts crying with happiness, quickly hiding her tears as she hurries to the kitchen to put the flowers in a vase. While Yume is relieved to see her mother so joyful, she notices Mizuto slip away to the family altar. He's quietly praying for his deceased mother, looking upset. Yume realizes he's crawling into himself, having never really known a mother's love for most of his life. She then follows the loser into the room and, acting as the older sister, sits by his side and leans on him for support. Afterward, they start talking about their parents, and Mizuto shares his plan to give their dad and stepmom some alone time, since they haven't had a real chance to enjoy married life and bump stomachs yet. Yume starts thinking of ways to achieve this, but her thoughts quickly turn into the spicy kind when she imagines being left alone overnight with Mizuto. However, trying to be strategic, Mizuto suggests they just spend the night somewhere else. When Yume panics, he jokingly suggests a love hotel, an idea she finds so repulsive that she'd rather die. The next day, Mizuto finds the perfect solution. He'll stay at Kawanami's boarding house, and Yume will stay with Minami. Conveniently, their apartments are right next to each other, making it feel like a weird double date. On the day of the plan, Minami is overjoyed, silently thanking Mizuto for lending her his stepsister so she can lick Yume's feet while she's sleeping. Once they arrive at the apartments, Minami immediately clings to Yume's arm, leaving the boys behind as they head to their rooms, warning each other not to disturb their peace. Once settled, they ask Minami and Kawanami about their relationship. They explain that they've been childhood friends since primary school, but Kawanami adds that they've drifted apart. The conversation then shifts to Mizuto and Yume's sibling bond. Kawanami starts teasing Mizuto, asking if he's seen Yume's massive honkers. Mizuto firmly denies it, but Yume, hearing everything through the wall, starts banging on it in absolute embarrassment. At this point, Mizuto is fed up with Kawanami's stupidity and vows to get his revenge. He then ties his friend to the bed and reads his embarrassing diary out loud, revealing his secret desire to become a police officer and be Minami's baby daddy in the future. This earns another loud bang on the wall, this time from a mortified Minami. Later, the group goes to a nearby restaurant for dinner, but an awkward silence hangs in the air until Minami and Kawanami start bickering like an old married couple, even knowing each other's favorite orders while refusing to admit they're close. At one point, Mizuto goes to the drinking fountain, but being a loser who never eats out with friends has no idea how to use it. Seeing this, Yume pops up to grill him for his lack of social experience, but then shows him how it works, ending up with a disgusting green sludge in her own glass that looks like the Hulk's bodily fluids. Eventually, they both end up with nuclear waste in their cups and share a laugh at their shared loser status. During the meal, Minami pushes her non-existent melons toward Mizuto and asks him to help her study, making Yume jealous, but Mizuto deflects, saying Yumi is the smarter one. Hearing this, Yume's confidence swells, but Mizuto immediately puts her in her place by saying that her best attempt is only as good as his laziest effort, which crushes her confidence. Later, Kawanami complains about studying and asks Mizuto why he's trying so hard when his grades are already good. But Mizuto admits that his true goal is to beat Yume in the grades and make her his toy. This verbal diarrhea is surprisingly inspiring to Kawanami, who decides he wants to beat Minami in the rankings as well. Late that night, while Minami and Kawanami are asleep, Mizuto and Yume both step out onto their separate balconies, surprised to see each other. The quiet night air reminds Yume of their junior high camp memory, watching the moon together. She's on the verge of confessing her lingering feelings for him, but stops herself. Instead, she decides to just enjoy the view, accepting the annoying reality that, for now, they are just step-siblings. As the days pass, the dreaded midterms approach, and the academic pressure begins to build on all their peanut brains. After class, Minami invites Yume to walk home together, but she politely declines, explaining that she needs to study for the exams. Having topped the highly competitive entrance exam, she feels the immense pressure from everyone to defend her title as the wisest chick at school. So, as soon as she gets home, Yume dives straight into her books. It turns out that she has a haunted memory from her second year of junior high when Mizuto, out of nowhere, completely crushed her in math, which also happens to be her best subject. That single defeat pushed her to work even harder, and she's determined not to let it happen again. Just then, she glances over at Mizuto, who is just casually reading a book in the living room, completely unbothered about the upcoming exams. Seeing him so relaxed while she's stressing feels like a punch to the gut. It bothers her so much that she marches over and reminds him to study, warning him that he's going to lose to her because being at the top is her rightful place. Hearing this, a competitive fire ignites in Mizuto. He accepts her challenge like a warrior, and their trash talk escalates higher than a UFC fight. As they continue thrashing each other, Yume calls him a cheater, and Mizuto calls her a stupid milk factory, and fed up with the disrespect, he declares he will completely demolish her. On the first day of exams, Yume answers every question with confidence, and estimates her scores around 94%. However, knowing that Mizuto is a natural genius in the ROT exams, she worries his score might be dangerously close to hers. Later, her curiosity gets the better of her, and she sneaks into his room to check his test paper. To her absolute shock, she finds that he left the last question, an incredibly easy one, completely blank. At that moment, it is revealed that Mizuto sabotaged himself to let Yume win. In a fit of rage, Yume storms into the living room and confronts him, demanding to know why he didn't even bother trying to beat her. But being the nonchalant king, Mizuto just shrugs it off. Even then, Yume refuses to accept this pathetic victory since she doesn't want to win unfairly, and she feels deeply insulted, as if he thinks she's too dumb to win on her own. While the two continue to bicker, their mother walks in on this tense moment, just as Yume is about to hit Mizuto. She quickly tries to intervene, but Mizuto finally snaps. He yells that he purposely sacrificed himself for her, yet she's still angry and desperate to stay on top. Frightened by the intensity of their argument, their mother simply leaves the scene, leaving them to fight. Confused and deeply hurt by his actions, Yume runs to her room, more determined than ever. From that day onwards, she sacrifices sleep to score more marks, studying like Hermione to secure her position. When the final results are posted, Yume looks at the board and sees the ultimate irony. She came in second place, just below Mizuto. The loser somehow managed to beat her anyway. Yume feels completely isolated and belittled after this failure, but just then her friends appear. Minami starts cheering loudly for her second place finish, and her other friends congratulate her for doing her best. Their genuine support and comfort make Yume tear up. It's at this moment that she has a powerful realization. Her worth isn't defined by being the smartest. Yume also decides she can't let Mizuto treat her this way, and that she wants to be reliable for him, not just his rival. Without wasting a second, Yume rushes to the library to find Mizuto. There, she sees him talking to a quiet girl with a wolf cut named Isana. The two are peacefully reading a book and having a deep, philosophical discussion about the meaning of friendship. Isana even asks Mizuto to wear her dirty little sock as a sign of their bond, and he happily puts it on his disgustingly hairy legs. Seeing this uniquely intimate moment, Yume feels a sharp and undeniable pang of jealousy. Later, when the four of them meet, Isana gets incredibly nervous around the extroverted Minami. Overwhelmed by her confusing feelings of jealousy, Yume gets flustered and abruptly leaves the scene. Over the next few days, Yume's behavior flips completely. She starts becoming incredibly nice and gentle toward Mizuto, which bothers him far more than her anger ever did. So one day, he confides in Isana, who, despite finding people hard to read, advises him to stop going with the flow and follow his heart. Hearing this sparks an idea in Mizuto's mind, and he decides to act on it. That night, just as Yume is stewing in her petty little jealousy, Mizuto shows up at her door. He's deliberately wearing her favorite outfit and hairstyle. Without saying a word, he approaches his stepsister, backs her into a corner against the wall like Johnny Sins, and squeezes her so hard she feels like a sandwich. He then leans in close and points out her racing pulse, a physical reaction siblings definitely shouldn't have for each other. Mizuto tells her that her sudden, weird distance has been upsetting him. Cornered and flustered, Yume finally cracks and admits everything. She was jealous of Isana, and the idea that some other girl might tickle his pickle. She then asks him if it's okay for siblings to feel that way about each other. But Mizuto simply teases her, calling her scary, and with the tension finally broken, they return to their usual bickering banter. A few days later, Yume and Isana meet again and are properly introduced as new friends. To clear the air once and for all, Yume bluntly asks Isana if she has feelings for Mizuto. However, Isana, malfunctioning under the pressure, blurts out that she'd rather kiss a sumo wrestler's belly than Mizuto's face, and that she sometimes wishes she were a boy. This bizarre but positive declaration proves she's not interested, and solidifies their view of her as an endearingly weird friend. Though Yume and Minami are still not entirely convinced Isana won't try to eat Mizuto's sausage, for now, the crisis is averted. In a flashback to junior high, a younger Yume decided to confess her feelings to Mizuto after a long hesitation. She's the one who holds the balls in the relationship, writing a love letter for Mizuto. But at the very last second, her own balls shrink, and she chickens out. Feeling like she'll never get a second chance, Yume eventually musters the courage to give her crush the letter. Mizuto has no game at all, so he naturally accepts her proposal, and just like that, they become a couple. Back in the present, Isana discovers a mysterious note in her locker. For some reason, the letter threatens her, claiming the sender knows her secret and demands she meet them alone. Hesitantly, when Isana arrives at the location, she finds out the sender is none other than Yume and Minami. It simply turns out to be a stupid prank to get her to talk about her feelings. Minami starts teasing Isana about her secret, and Isana finally spills the beans about her past as an online streamer. However, it seems like that's not the secret they're after. Realizing there's no way out of this, Minami cuts to the chase and asks Isana if she likes Mizuto. Isana claims that she does without hesitation, but when Yume clarifies they mean romantically, Isana calls them delusional, dim-witted, dumb idiots. However, the ex-couple is determined to prove their point, so they show Isana a video they took of Mizuto sleeping in the library. Just the sight of him makes Isana blush uncontrollably. It's pretty clear that Isana's denial of her feelings is as believable as a penguin pretending it can fly. She explains that she's never fallen in love before and doesn't know what it feels like. Isana claims that she sees Mizuto purely as a friend, and as long as she can talk to him like usual, that's enough for her. At this point, her heart is like a cozy studio with a bunch of stoners at the front door. Hearing this, Yume sees a reflection of her old self in Isana, as the girl with low self-esteem, constant fear of failure, and the tendency to stick with situations she doesn't really seem to enjoy. Somehow, Yume managed to overcome those hurdles, so she encourages Isana, telling her not to give up if she really wants to become Mizuto's girlfriend. And with this simple assurance, their master plan begins. The first phase involves Isana observing Mizuto in the library while Yume and Minami hide, using a camera to zoom in and catch his reactions. Their first strategy is for Isana to show a little skin like a Twitch streamer. She bends over, accidentally giving him a view of her dumper wrappers. However, Mizuto, the dense Sigma that he is, simply and casually tells her that her wrapper is a little short. This nonchalant response renders their plan totally useless. Next, Minami suggests that Isana should use her feminine assets to remind Mizuto that she's a girl, believing that physical closeness will eventually make an impression. Following this advice, Isana makes her boldest move yet. She asks Mizuto to help her with a book, deliberately pressing her knocker boots against his arm. However, the stud simply points out that her jugs are about to leak some oil and nothing more. Frustrated but determined, Isana confesses she did it on purpose, explaining that since she knows he prefers girls with smaller figures, she wanted to give him an educational display to showcase the wonders of a fuller female anatomy. For Isana, a romantic relationship is a huge step beyond friendship, and she's terrified of jeopardizing the bond they have, just because of her feelings. Recognizing their mistake, Yume and Minami apologize to Isana, reassuring her that they don't want her to change and encouraging her to remain true to herself. However, they acknowledge that Isana's insecurity about her femininity is a real issue. So, hoping to boost her confidence, they decide to give her a makeover, including some horrendous makeup. When Mizuto sees her new look, he completely misinterprets it, mistakenly assuming her red lips are just the result of eating greasy fried food. As Isana tries to get closer to him, he continuously pulls away, valuing his personal space deeply. He even warns Isana that if she persists, he'll show her just how sacred that space is, as if it were the one-piece treasure Luffy has been striving for. Seeing that these direct approaches are working against her, Minami advises Isana to confess her feelings to Mizuto as soon as possible. She even suggests that waiting too long will only make it more difficult, especially since Mizuto currently sees her as nothing more than a friend. At this point, Isana views herself as gloomy and difficult, with her only confidence resting in her ample Ungabungas. But with Yume and Minami's support, she prepares to finally confess her true feelings to that creepy nerd. Hiding nearby, Yume and Minami crawl into position to eavesdrop on the confession. On the other hand, Isana, though incredibly anxious, manages to express her genuine emotions. She musters up her courage and tells Mizuto how happy she is to have found someone like him, who doesn't treat her like a freak, and then she confesses her feelings for him. Listening from her hiding spot, Yume's heart pounds. But Mizuto reacts like a true gentleman. He gently tells Isana that while he enjoys her company, he can't pursue a romantic relationship with her. He explains that his heart can only be fully open to one person, but sadly that person doesn't belong to him anymore. While Isana listens to his stupid verbal diarrhea, Mizuto explains that this person still occupies his thoughts and refuses to let go. He reassures Isana that it isn't her fault and there's nothing wrong with her, because according to his sausage, his affections are already being directed elsewhere. Hearing this confession, Yume is completely shocked. She realizes with certainty that the person Mizuto still has in his heart is her. But at the same time, she feels that a kind, sweet girl like Isana is a much better fit for Mizuto than she is. The next day, to Yume and Minami's surprise, Isana is already back to being cool and friendly with Mizuto, as if the rejection never happened. She tells them that Mizuto's kindness, even in rejection, was enough for her. This comes off as a surprise to Yume and Minami, as they have never seen a confident girl like her recently. The following day, Mizuto and Isana are in the school library, casually spending time together reading manga. It looks like their friendship is completely unshaken by the recent confession and rejection. As they share a little conversation, Isana asks Mizuto if she can visit his house to see his legendary book collection. However, her ulterior motive is to see which illustrations he has folded in his light novels, hoping to gain insight into which characters captured his imagination and made his Pringle hard in his formative years. While Mizuto gets speechless, Isana starts teasing him about his slender flagpole, but he immediately threatens to revoke their homie status. Realizing she went a little overboard, Isana quickly apologizes by squeezing her melons into his arm and activates her puppy face. At last, the limpy loser Mizuto allows Isana to visit his book collection. A few days before the planned visit, Isana meets up with Yumi and Minami. They immediately start grilling her for her unfashionable clothes, saying she looks like a drugged rock star. So the girls declare that they are going to transform her from an ugly blobfish into a beautiful mermaid by giving her a complete makeover, ensuring she doesn't embarrass herself in front of her dream boy. Isana admits she doesn't have any money for new clothes since she does not come from money. But fortunately, Yume and Minami offer to pay for everything under one condition. Isana has to wear whatever they pick for her, with no refusals or complaints. With this, their fashion adventure begins. When Isana tries on the first outfit Minami has chosen, which is a seductive, revealing piece straight out of a Michael Bay movie, she feels incredibly uneasy. But what truly grabs Yume and Minami's attention is the sheer size of Isana's melons. They are left speechless at the sight, as the knockers resemble the size of bowling balls. However, Isana casually explains that she's a G-cup, and in a surprising moment, Minami can't resist reaching out to test their jiggle. At this point, the main challenge of the makeover becomes clear. They have to find a way to minimize or hide her bust if they are to mimic Yume's more modest and balanced style. So, the girls decide to completely copy Yume's look, but doing so would clearly violate the unspoken rules of the girls' world. This whole situation makes Yume reflect on her own past fashion choices. During her junior high days, she had a date planned with Mizuto and was extremely excited. She spent hours putting together the perfect, cute, and charming outfit. However, when the date finally happened, her boyfriend didn't comment on her outfit or seem to take much notice at all. Yume had eagerly awaited a compliment all day from her date, but eventually she started to believe that her outfit must have been so unappealing that he didn't want to embarrass her by mentioning it. But just as they were about to go their separate ways, the Chad unexpectedly remarked that her outfit was adorable, but suggested she avoid wearing a miniskirt outdoors unless they were inside. Hearing this, Yume was finally overjoyed, realizing he was being possessive and couldn't stop giggling when she got home. From that day on, Yume always dressed according to Mizuto's preferences, turning it into a daily fashion habit. After their makeover session, Yume shows off her new style to her friends, but Isana and Minami agree that it only changes her from beautiful to gorgeous. In a few hours, the time comes for Isana's visit. She makes a big willy move, showing up at Mizuto's house wearing her new clothes and directly asking for his opinion, hoping for a huge boost to her confidence. But on the other hand, Mizuto is having his own flashback like a war veteran, remembering when Yume wanted to read a new book but was too broke to buy it. He had offered for her to come to his house since he had the whole series, and he remembers how nice his offer seemed at the time. When Isana arrives, Mizuto's parents can't believe the beautiful girl he's brought home. Just then, Yume immediately pops up, acting as a supervisor to ensure no bodily fluids are exchanged with her stepbrother. With the formalities out of the way, the three of them head to Mizuto's library-like room. Isana immediately picks up a book and makes herself at home, lying on Mizuto's bed while she reads the latest edition of One Piece. On the other hand, Yume starts creaking with jealousy, seeing how close they are, but Mizuto and Isana are completely cool with it, reassuring her they are just school friends. After a few hours, Isana finishes her book and, feigning soreness from reading, asks Mizuto for a gentle massage. Without hesitation, the limpy simp uses his hand on her shoulders as Isana starts making loud, happy noises, which only makes Yume more jealous. To top it off, Isana asks Mizuto to put her socks on for her, and Yume is even more annoyed by this dumb request. A few moments later, Yume corners Isana and asks if she still likes Mizuto, despite the humiliating rejection she faced a few days ago. Surprisingly, Isana says she is a little hurt, explaining that she will be sad if Mizuto finds someone new because she doesn't want to lose the only person who has ever considered her a friend. Hearing this, Yume asks if she doesn't consider her a friend too. But Isana explains that Yume could never fill Mizuto's specific place in her life due to her lack of a solid flagpole. Driven by a powerful wave of jealousy, Yume marches into Mizuto's room. She then takes off her own socks and demands that he put them on for her. But when he proceeds to put them on, Yume mimics Isana's happy noises as his hands go up and up her thighs. Later, after a fun day, Isana goes home. She tells Mizuto that her parents won't stop asking if she is going to be his baby mama, and she had to awkwardly explain the rejection. She then begs Mizuto to continue being nice to her because she hasn't been able to move on yet, and asks him to keep recommending books for her room. Mizuto's kind words and their shared love of books remind him of the times he and Yume used to read together while they were dating, leaving him feeling deeply nostalgic about the memories they shared in the past. In a flashback, a pivotal moment is seen when Mizuto and Yume were still a loving couple, occasionally bumping dumpers. A few days after they shared their first kiss, Mizuto invited Yume over to his room, hoping to get some penetration action. For two nerds, this is a huge deal, as it's the first time he's ever asked a girl over, and it's Yume's first time in a boy's room. However, she nervously sits down, because she has dreamt of sitting on his bed so she can smell his fragrant sheets. The tension is thicker than Nicki Minaj as they nervously eye each other, a clear sign that a kiss is imminent. Sensing the vibe, Yume even closes her eyes in anticipation. But Mizuto, in a moment of pure cowardice, loses his nerve and destroys the entire plan. Instead of kissing her, he awkwardly suggests they read a book like a stupid idiot. After some time, he makes another attempt, leaning in for a kiss, but once again cancels it like a wimp and offers to walk her home. As he walks Yume home, the chick is sad and frustrated that he couldn't make a move, while Mizuto is internally cursing himself for being a coward with no tennis balls, unable to give her the pleasure she clearly wanted. As Yume reflects on the last 6 months of hand-holding and shared kisses, she feels like their relationship should be progressing. But on that day, nothing happens. It feels as though Cupid hit the dumb button on their love story. Exactly 1 year later, they enter their 3rd year of junior high and are placed in separate classes. Yume is devastated by this arrangement, worried that her school days will become dull without Mizuto, and fearing she won't make any friends on her own. In the meantime, hoping to comfort her, Mizuto tells her that their bond will flourish beyond the classroom because they are soulmates. He promises that they can still spend a lot of time together, making the library their regular rendezvous spot after school, while making the girl happy. However, the entire story shifts when Yume makes a new friend after noticing her reading a book Yume liked. For the first time in many years, she is ecstatic to have someone else to spend time with besides Mizuto. Ever since that day, Yume has been arriving late to their usual library hangout, often because she was with her new friend. One day, Mizuto asks if they can hang out over the weekend, but Yume declines, saying she already has plans with her new friend. This leaves Mizuto navigating the unfamiliar waters of no longer being Yume's sole weekend companion, and because he is a simpy loser, he feels quite downhearted. When Yume is late once again, Mizuto's frustration boils over, and he unintentionally raises his voice at her like a drunk father. However, he immediately regrets his outburst and resolves to apologize the next day. But fate has other plans because the following day, Yume declines her friend's invitation to hang out so she can finally meet Mizuto on time at the library. But she is caught completely off guard when she arrives to see him talking to another girl named Isana, who is sitting in her usual spot. Pain shoots through her as she sees the girl sitting in her chair. She completely misunderstands the situation, as her mind is filled with images of this girl taking her place on all the other days she had been late. She then hides and waits for the girl to leave. As soon as Isana is gone, Yume confronts Mizuto about the chick he was talking to. He immediately apologizes for being an idiot the other day, explaining that he was just jealous because he likes her and wants her all to himself. But at this point, Yume is too hurt to listen, and she has no interest in reason, as this is when her villain arc begins. She calls Mizuto a fool for hanging out with other girls while claiming to be jealous. Yume even accuses him of cheating for allowing another woman to sit in their special spot, as this was the very place they first met. Stunned by her reaction, Mizuto calls her delusional and tells her to calm down. Yume eventually realizes she might be overreacting, but it still hurts her deeply to see him with another girl in their special place. Meanwhile, Mizuto knows he's just an insecure loser who needs to stop being an idiot and simply trust his girlfriend. The next day, they coincidentally run into each other at a bookstore. Seizing the moment, Mizuto offers a genuine apology for his behavior in the library the other day, not wanting them to keep pretending around each other at school. But Yume remains silent, and she refuses to offer an apology in return. This refusal leaves Mizuto wondering if they've really reconciled, or if she just enrolled in some silent apology academy. Regardless, it is pretty clear that there is still friction between the two young couples. Ever since this incident, they start drifting apart like a fart in the wind. A few days later, Yume goes to a festival alone, unlike their first date where Mizuto found her when she got lost. Days turn to weeks, and soon, a year passes, and their anniversary comes and goes without a single word. At this point, these two idiots are just two distant students at school. One day, when Christmas arrives, Yume is by herself, desperately hoping that Mizuto will show up and keep her warm like he did the year before. But nothing seems to happen. A few months later, Valentine's Day comes and goes, and things are still the same, dry and secluded. Finally, after several months of no contact, as graduation draws near, Mizuto brings up the idea of breaking up. Realizing there's no point in being together like this, Yume coldly agrees. In a matter of seconds, their lovey-dovey relationship is now over. Just a few days later, in an unbelievable twist of fate, Mizuto's father introduces him to his soon-to-be stepsister, who turns out to be Yume. They are both stunned to hear this information, realizing that their fate wants them to get freaky in bed as soon as possible. Back in the present, Yume and Mizuto are hanging out in Mizuto's room, teasing each other about being barren amateur losers for not doing anything that first night she came over. One thing leads to another, and they start arguing, both admitting that they should have just gotten down to business back then. A few days later, a powerful typhoon hits central Japan, causing all train services to be canceled and preventing this weird stepbrother and stepsister's parents from returning home for the night. This leaves Mizuto and Yume completely alone in the house for the first time ever. As if that weren't enough, a massive cockroach, acting like a proper wingman, appears in Yume's room, causing her to freak out like a little brat. She immediately uses this opportunity to run to Mizuto's room like a little coward and begs to stay there for the night. The boy is left shocked, and with a power outage adding to the chaos, the two end up having to share his bed. Before the lights go out, Yume jokingly remarks that she's sure he won't attempt anything naughty. She assumes that Mizuto doesn't have the tennis ball in his pants big enough to try something spicy, since he had the exact same opportunity back when they were actually dating. While the simpy loser simply listens, Yume grills him for his lack of action. But suddenly, Mizuto tells her to shut up and turns over to the other side to sleep. As the two lie in the dark, Mizuto turns to face her, and for the first time in ages, he sees her face up close, only a few inches away from his stupid nose. Despite their messy breakup and the awkward new family dynamic, it's hard for him to pretend that nothing has changed or that he doesn't care anymore. For the first time in a long time, seeing Yume sleeping so peacefully, he's shocked and quietly calls her name like she's Jesus or something. The next morning at the breakfast table, Mizuto is still going on about the incident, playfully accusing Yume of being a little dorky chick who is afraid of insects, which is why she had to spend the night in his room. On the other hand, their parents, who have since returned, find the entire situation hilarious. Instead of asking their youngins if they penetrated, they start teasing the brats, calling them an old married couple and joking that even their relatives back home would laugh at the story during their upcoming family trip. Speaking of the trip, their father informs them that they'll be heading to the countryside to meet relatives, and that they should bring swimsuits, since most of the fun will be centered around water activities. Hearing this, Yume's mom gets excited and suggests Yume get a new swimsuit, since all she has is her school one. She even manages to get a reluctant Mizuto to join them on the shopping trip, even though this loser is always wet. As they continue planning, Yume, to avoid being seen with a loser like Mizuto, puts on a pair of glasses as a disguise and tells him he should wear a hat to hide his face as well. At the store, Yume tries on a particularly seductive swimsuit and comes out to show Mizuto her gigantic dumpers and honkers, wanting his honest opinion on her personality. However, his anxiety spikes as he looks at every curve and detail, the gradual beating of his heart accelerating all the way to his sausage. She then asks Mizuto to praise the swimsuit, but instead of a real compliment, he awkwardly calls her cute. He then praises Yume's choice of floaties, completely creeping her out. At this point, Yume is left unsatisfied and frustrated by the partner she has, but on the way home, she's secretly happy that she got both a new swimsuit and the full undivided attention of Mizuto's eyes on her pictures. On their walk home, they unexpectedly find themselves at the very spot where they shared their first kiss. Just then, a sudden gust of wind blows Yume's hat away like a Bollywood movie. Mizuto acts on his reflexes and immediately catches it, and they end up face to face in a romantic position. For a moment, it feels like the six gods are helping them get on top of each other. Hoping for some action, Yume closes her eyes, remembering their past kisses, and Mizuto briefly does the same, tempted by the thunderously beating heart in his pants. However, instead of leaning in for another kiss, the loser stops himself and playfully flicks her forehead like a basketball coach, breaking the spell of nasty shenanigans. Back at home, Yume finally understands why he didn't kiss her. It turns out that Mizuto was reluctant to destroy their new, stable life as step-siblings for the sake of his lingering emotions, and a stain of biological mayonnaise on his trousers. A few days later, Isana comes over for some Netflix and chill, ready to get her hormones spread on Mizuto's bedsheets. Seeing her, Yume is immediately filled with internal fury as she watches Isana and Mizuto sitting way too closely, almost like a married couple. To make matters even worse for Yume, Isana unzips her hoodie, revealing a bit of her puppies, and scratches her jugs casually as if no one else were around. At this point, Yume's mind races with wild, jealous thoughts, imagining Mizuto touching Isana and them discussing marriage. As soon as the movie ends, Mizuto and Isana start discussing it with sophisticated nonsense, like a film director with an intense liking over filthy feet, and Yume can't understand a word. After hours of watching, a thirsty Mizuto asks Yume for a glass of water. She hesitates for a moment before passing him her cup, from which he drinks directly. This small act makes Isana realize they just shared an indirect kiss, and she wonders aloud if such interactions are common among relatives, hinting that they must have committed Sweet Home Alabama type stuff already. A few moments later, it seems as if the new movie is extremely long and boring, and Mizuto starts getting drowsy. Seeing this, Isana teasingly suggests he could rest his head on her lap for a nap, but Yume quickly opposes this idea as if Isana just threatened to unalive her stepbrother. As they continue talking, Isana jokes about giving him a complimentary ear cleaning service, which she announces as her dream. By then, Yume has had enough, so she tells the weird girl with massive milk tankers to move away from her stepbrother. In the end, Mizuto unexpectedly drifts off to sleep, but instead of sleeping on Isana's lap, he finds comfort in the softness of Yume's thighs. Later, Yume's mother brings up Mizuto and Isana's relationship, noting their obvious chemistry and how they resemble a couple. She playfully suggests that Yume should find herself a charming boyfriend to even the odds and keep Mizuto from having an advantage. However, Yume tells her mother to wait and to stop acting like Kim Kardashian's mother. It seems like for Yume, it's not a competition. She believes in waiting patiently, trusting in the timing of the heart. In that moment, she admits out loud that she can only see herself with Mizuto, a confession that surprises even herself. In a flashback, when Yume and Mizuto were dating, the little brats are over the moon. Right after their first date, Yume is alone in her room, and she can't stop thinking about her stupid boyfriend, Mizuto. She then impulsively calls him on his phone, not for any particular reason, but just to hear his voice. But the moment she hears Mizuto say her name, she starts mumbling like Mike Tyson. Seeing the uncertainty in Yume's voice, he quickly finishes the call, leaving her feeling a mix of happiness and sadness, wishing they could have talked for a little longer. In the present, the newly blended Irido family arrives at their hometown to visit relatives for a summer festival. They are immediately greeted by their warm and welcoming grandma named Natsu, who is thrilled to see her family. She then shifts her focus to Mizuto and Yume, wondering if they are getting along as new siblings. While the stupid question lingers in the air, they also run into Yume's cousins, a cheerful and energetic girl named Mocha, and her shy younger brother, Chikuma. Mocha immediately throws her arms around Mizuto in a tight hug, almost as if they were in an Alabama-themed long-distance relationship. On the other hand, Chikuma is clearly smitten by his relative's arrival, and he shyly hides behind his brother, stealing glances at Yume's giant Unga Bungas whenever he can. After sharing unnecessary pleasantries, Mocha invites everyone to a family barbecue by the riverside, specifically reminding Yume not to forget her swimsuit. Yume assures her she'll remember it like her life depends on it, especially since Mizuto was the one who helped her pick it out. At the barbecue, Chikuma continues his silent admiration of Yume's milk containers from afar. In the meantime, Mocha pulls Yume aside and remarks that the family used to be seriously worried that Mizuto would grow up to be a withdrawn loner. But now they're happy to see he's become a Chad who pulls baddies on a daily basis. Yume now understands the heavy burden Mizuto's family carries and feels determined to keep them safe. As they talk, Mocha glances at Yume's bikini, commenting on her large jugs and small waist, and correctly suspects that a boyfriend must have bought it for her. Yume instinctively looks over at Mizuto, who is sitting under a tree like a stupid monk, completely absorbed in his stupid book. Surprisingly, this glance makes Mocha both suspicious and a little jealous. She recalls how Mizuto never once spoke to her in the past, despite her looking after him since they were little brats. It turns out that Mizuto used to just ignore Mocha whenever she tried to engage with him. She then wonders how funny it is that interactions can resurface and surprise us like an uppercut. Later that night, with all the adults drunk and merry, Mocha suggests that Yume go find Mizuto, who has likely retreated to his great-grandfather's study, and tell him it's time to take a bath. She goes on a hunt for this little simp, and soon, Yume finds him exactly where Mocha predicted, engrossed in a rare autobiography. The book, Siberia's Dancing Girl, was written by his great-grandfather and details his experiences as a prisoner in a Soviet camp after the war. It is revealed that the book described where his grandfather met and fell in love with a Siberian woman. As they continue chatting, Mizuto explains that he found the book when he was young and has read it every single year since. He then lends the precious book to Yume, making her only the second person to ever read it. Realizing how much this book means to him, Yume feels deeply honored and quickly becomes absorbed in the crazy lore. The story is so powerful and emotional that it makes her cry, as her tears fall directly onto the pages, but just as Yume reaches up to wipe them away, she notices faint older tear streaks on the very same page, a subtle sign that Mizuto had also cried in that exact same spot like a total wacko. In that exact moment, Yume gets a sense of Mizuto's constant loneliness, his need to escape into books to get away from life itself. Just as she is thinking about her current stepbrother, Mizuto comes back into the room. Thinking about the tragic love story in the book, Yume asks him about his own first love. Surprisingly, he looks away and describes someone like Mocha, a comment that makes Yume's heart sink with disappointment. The next day, Yume is visibly depressed after their conversation last night. Meanwhile, Mocha notices her friend's mood and asks if something's bothering her little dumpers. Yume immediately downloads her insecurities and confesses that she feels selfish for having too much hope for her relationship with Mizuto, especially now that she thinks his heart belongs to someone else. Mocha immediately asks if Yume is in love with him, but Yume, confused and uncertain about their relationship, can only say that she doesn't know. Hearing this, Mocha begins to preach about the complexities of love and gives Yume an idea to start moving forward. Understanding the intricacies of their tangled emotions, Mocha arranges for Yume and Mizuto to have some uninterrupted time together. She then puts them alone in a room and assures them that no one will bother them for the next 30 minutes. Initially, Yume is lost in thought, unsure of how to start the conversation with this professional loser. On the other hand, Mizuto reads the tense situation and gently tells her to say whatever she needs to say. Mustering all her courage, she begins confessing her feelings. She tells Mizuto that he was her first love, and when he chose to end their relationship, a part of her felt a sense of relief, believing her pain, sadness, and loneliness would finally fade. But now, as she reflects on their past, she can't help but regret how things turned out. As she confesses her feelings, Yume starts crying uncontrollably. Weighed down by a heavy flood of missed opportunities, she wonders what could have happened if only they hadn't broken up. If only she had reached out to him during that long summer break. If only she had given him a gift at Christmas or made him chocolate on Valentine's Day. If only she had refused his wishes and fought to protect their relationship. This is all she wants to convey to him, but the words are stuck in her throat. Yume asks him if they can turn back time, and witnessing her raw emotional breakdown, Mizuto understands the depth of her feelings without her needing to say more. He then releases any lingering doubts and hugs Yume, allowing them to finally revisit their shared history as nasty penetrators. Later, having gathered her balls from the floor, Yume declares to Mocha that she has accepted that Mizuto's first love was Mocha. But Mizuto, overhearing this, roasts her for her foolish assumption. He looks her straight in the eye and reveals the truth. She, and only she, was his first love. The girl he described as being like Mocha was just a clever misdirection to hide his true feelings. Hearing this, Yume is left completely stunned, finally understanding the depth of their tragic misunderstanding and the powerful feelings that never truly went away. The next day, it's the day of the festival, and Yume emerges wearing a lovely yukata that makes her look like the goddess Aphrodite herself. Mocha immediately starts glazing her with saliva dripping down her legs, declaring that all the men at the festival would undoubtedly want a piece of her. Just as they are talking about Yume's outfit, Mizuto makes his appearance, also wearing a yukata and casually popping a rice cake into his mouth like a stupid idiot. The sight of him looking so effortlessly handsome makes Yume completely fold like an origami paper. She then begs Mocha to take a picture of them together to capture this moment forever. It's a joyful, classic moment, a reminder that even in unexpected surprises, memories are created that shine like fireworks in the night sky. At the festival, Yume immediately starts grilling Mizuto, calling him a fraud Sigma for daring to join a celebration filled with happy people. As they walk through the crowd, Mocha suggests they should all hold hands like a bunch of homeschooled idiots. Her idea was to hold hands like she once did with Chikuma when he was little, so they wouldn't get lost. However, Mizuto immediately dismisses the idea, noting they're old enough not to need it. But on the other hand, Yume doesn't care about his nonchalant reasoning. She quickly grabs his hairy hand and intertwines their sweaty fingers, insisting it's a perfectly natural thing for siblings to do, all while continuing to hold his soft hand, dreaming of inserting his fingers somewhere else. A few moments later, they eventually find their way to a shooting stall. Chikuma eagerly gives it a try, with Mocha helping him by pushing her melons against him to steady his aim, an act of sibling closeness that makes Yume raise an eyebrow. Unfortunately, they fail to win the prize Chikuma so desperately wants. Seeing his disappointment, Mocha urges Mizuto to give it a shot since he has an excellent pull-out game. As Mizuto, filled with the spirit of John Wick, lines up his shot, Mocha suggests that Yume, as the elder sister, should assist him by offering a simple back hug to help him aim. Uncertain of her true intentions, Mizuto prepares to shoot the shot. But just as Yume leans in to help, she unexpectedly loses her balance. This causes her melons to lightly brush against his back, breaking his mojo for a second. However, to everyone's astonishment, the shot is a success, and they win the prize that's worth maybe a penny or two. Despite this, a happy Chikuma receives the doll he wanted from Mizuto. But the comedic twist of the unanticipated outcome is hilarious. Mizuto can't help but wonder if Yume's actions were deliberate. He asks her about it, and to his relief, she assures him her intentions were pure. However, the girl doesn't miss the chance to playfully tease him, suggesting that perhaps he's just more accustomed to such close encounters, especially with girls like Isana who often get physically close without hesitation. But the nonchalant king counters by saying Isana's Pringles are fuller than hers anyway. A few hours later, the little brats meet up with their parents, who introduce Yume to an old family friend. The old woman smiles warmly and tells Yume to take good care of Mizuto, not realizing she is literally just 3 months old. This surprises Yume to the core as she wonders why everyone keeps saying that, as if Mizuto is a helpless vegetable that needs a personal caretaker watching over him. Just as their family is about to head to their reserved spot to view the fireworks, they realize Mizuto is missing. The family explains that he always disappears like this right before the show. Right at that moment, Yume finally understands how deeply uncomfortable he is around large crowds. She suddenly remembers all the subtle moments where he showed it, but she was too self-absorbed to notice. At this moment, Yume feels glad they became siblings, as it allowed her to see the different, constipated faces of Mizuto that she never would have seen if they had remained just boyfriend and girlfriend. She then recalls the ending line of his great-grandfather's book, where a person begs to not be left behind, and this is exactly what pushes her to go find this annoying loser. On the other hand, Mizuto is alone in a quiet park, watching society from a distance like a convicted felon. He's always felt disconnected from the world, as if he were the protagonist of Naruto Shippuden.
We don't care.
Merely going through the motions of life. He always wondered why people felt sorry for him for being motherless, and their pity only fueled the Sigma within him, making books his only world. It turns out that the world only became more colorful through the books he read, from Dostoevsky to Shakespeare. On top of that, his first meeting with Yume was a joke to him, but dating her made him feel complete for the first time in his miserable life. The girl was like the notebook to his life story, but when she disappeared from his world after their breakup, it was his second great loss after his mother's passing. Yume finally finds him, and immediately takes the opportunity to call him an antisocial loser. She asks him to remember their first festival date when he saved her after she got lost like a family dog. Hearing this, Mizuto begins to reminisce about all the times she would call just to hear his voice, and he realizes in that moment just how much she truly loved him. They then start talking about their first kiss, and Mizuto remembers every single detail of it, while Yume admits she was worried he would never make a move if she hadn't pushed him. Realizing all the subtle things she did for him, Mizuto praises her for her determination to make it happen. Curiosity finally gets the better of her, and she asks why he even agreed to date her in the first place. At this point, Mizuto's brain starts leaking oil, and he starts talking about some cheesy philosophical nonsense, explaining that it was likely fate. He says that if he had met Isana before her, he might never have pursued a relationship with Yume. But in a moment of honesty, Mizuto claims that what truly mattered in his life has always remained constant, and it's Yume. As the first fireworks illuminate the night sky, they watch the vibrant display together. Mizuto is so impressed with the beauty that he begins to cry like a little girl. In that magical moment, Yume seizes the opportunity. She leans in and kisses him, not as a stepsister, but as the woman in his heart who loves him dearly. With that kiss, she declares her intention to compete for the sole place in his heart, and for the first time in a long time, he promises to return the sentiment with all his heart. The next day, Mocha starts questioning Yume about what happened last night, but Chikuma, who clearly has a crush on Yume, tells his sister to shut her trap. Just then, the old hag grandma asks Yume to take care of Mizuto, and this time, she smiles and says she will. Back at school, Yume and Isana meet for the first time since the festival. The battle for Mizuto's love is on, and they both look like they want to rip each other's heads off. But when Mizuto introduces them, asserting that there's enough of him for both of them, Yume gets slightly possessive. Back at home, Mizuto and Yume finally acknowledge the undeniable truth. They still have feelings for each other. At this point, they both admit that being step-siblings is incredibly annoying, but it's a reality they're now willing to face together. If you like anime recaps like this, watch this video.